Welcome to another episode of the Diamond Podcast. I'm your host, Alfredo Diamond, local realtor, entrepreneur, and community advocate. Thank you for tuning in again. Today I'm excited. I've got a special guest. I got a story to share about it before I introduce this fellow. But he's one of my favorite people. He doesn't realize it yet, and let me tell you why. We're in our Chamber of Commerce meeting, and this gentleman is going to be presented as a new member, his company. And I'm standing there in the back, and, he gets around to him to introduce himself, and I'm like, just minding my business and listening to him and trying to get to know him. And this guy says, "Where's this guy at? Where's Diamond at?" And everybody points to me, and he's like, "Yeah, you. I love your podcast." And I'm like, "Man, no way, me." So that was just a great moment. The mayor was in there. I had to poke my chest out for a minute. So I can't thank you enough for that. But finally got him here. Excited to have him, Mr. Keith Webster, owner Smith-McQuiston Webster Funeral Home. Keith, welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. So, I'm just dying to get to know you better. And just tell me a little bit about your past. Like, where are you from? And what brought you to, this area here?
Well, I was born in Fort Wayne. My dad was a foundry pattern maker, and he bought a small business on Northwest 5th Street, and we moved here in 1968. Pretty much grew up here, graduated from Northeastern in 1983. As I said in the chamber interview, when I was introduced, I was one of those people. I got out of here as fast as I could. Mm-hmm. Went to college. Came back for a couple years, but then, nope, I got to go. So we kind of left the area in 1987, spent some time in Indy, landed in Madison for about 15 years, owned a business down there, started from scratch, and jumped on an opportunity to move back here to buy the funeral home in Fountain City in 2005.
So let me back up a second. So what type of business were you in before you came back this last time?
I've always been a funeral director.
Okay.
When I was 5, 6 years old, my grandma died. And I really credit my parents, and I see this a lot. My folks didn't shield me from reality. They took me to Grandma's funeral. They took me to Uncle Ben's funeral. They took me to Grandpa's funeral. And I was that curious kid in the funeral home who makes me nervous now because, what's up those stairs? What's behind that door?
Yeah.
I found out what was behind that door and what was up those stairs. Fast forward to when I was in high school, I lost a classmate.
Yeah.
And I watched Phil McQuiston take care of his kid's family, a bunch of kids that we didn't know what we were doing or what to do. And I stood on the front porch of this funeral home I own now and said, this is what I'm going to do.
Wow.
And really never looked back.
It's amazing how our experiences shape us into our future and what we end up doing. So, man, it's powerful. So I can tell you're really passionate about what you do. So walk me through, what it was like to become the business that you are today. How did that go? Like, was there acquisition? Walk me through those steps.
Where I am now, I always wanted to own a funeral home, thinking, I want to own a business. My dad owned a business. Ironically, he would sit at our coffee table at night wishing he could work for somebody, and I didn't understand that. But I went to college, worked for a couple of places. When I was in Madison, I worked at a funeral home, and the place I was at and the place across the street, they combined forces, and they sold to a national consolidator. And there was an opportunity. Literally, while some guy from Houston flew up and was talking to these owners about buying their businesses, my ears to the wall, listening from the other room.
Wow. And
I got with some people, bought Business Plans for Dummies. There's a book out there for that. Read it, wrote a business plan, and actually came back to Richmond. And does the name Gary Hackman ring a bell to you? He was with Wayne Bank and Trust. He was a loan officer. And we financed a funeral home in Madison through a Richmond bank. Pillow talk in Madison was kind of bad, so wanted to keep things on the down low. But so we built this funeral home. We're the only locally owned and operated funeral home in Jefferson County at that time. And people really were for that. They didn't like out-of-town ownership. They wanted to keep local. We grew so fast.
Wow.
I projected 50 families would call us in the first year and hoped maybe 25% increase for 5 years. Our first year, we served 60 families.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, okay, let's keep that 25% growth. Let's shoot for maybe 75 families will call us. I missed that projection. 120 families called us.
Where did you come up with the number for the 50? I mean, what did you base that on?
Pulling numbers out of the air that hopefully I would break even. You
And
know, I could pay my mortgage, I could pay my insurance, I could eat. 50 seemed like a nice, good number to start with. Turns out 50 really wasn't the right number, but
You did 160?
we did 120 our second
120?
year.
So did you have the staff to support that in place, or
No.
everything just kind of grew?
We kind of grew too big too fast.
Okay.
And we kept growing. So I got to a point where I didn't know my wife. I didn't know my kids because I was always at the funeral home. And in 2004, there were 3 things that happened in pretty quick succession. A friend of mine from high school and college came down to visit, and we're sitting on my deck having breakfast, and he's like, "When are you going to come back and buy Fountain City?" And I'm like, I think that ship has sailed. I don't think that's an opportunity that I'm going to ever have. And he went home. 2 weeks later, a guy in Madison named Bob Knox dies. Bob was born and raised in Madison. You know, it's kind of what happens in life. You die where you grew up. Bob had a sister named Ethel. Ethel was in a nursing home in Indianapolis. Ethel had a son in Pennsylvania who picked Mom up, brought her down to Uncle Bob's funeral, and we're standing at the cemetery after this service, and Ethel's daughter-in-law walks up to me, starts singing our praises, and, you know, not that it happens a lot, but it happens a lot. I had 3 services that day, so I needed to get back. And this lady goes, "You know, my dad used to be in the funeral business." And you'd be amazed how many people used to be in something, especially the funeral business, and they got out because it's kind of challenging. And I always ask, you know, well, where'd your dad, whoever, work at? And she said, Fountain City. And I kind of did what you're doing. Like, okay, lady, you've got my attention now,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I looked at her and I said, oh, if you're who I think you are, your brother-in-law is the reason I'm standing here talking to you, sweating in the sun. And it was Phil McQuiston's sister-in-law, Rhoda.
Wow.
And she was as surprised as I was that I knew where Fountain City was. We're 110 miles from here having this conversation.
That's crazy.
So I'm pulling out of the cemetery, and I'm thinking, just feel it. What's going on?
Something's meant to be.
Yeah. 2 weeks after that, my mom's getting her hip replaced down the street here at Reed, and I go out to visit Phil McQuiston. Mom's in recovery, and Phil wants to retire. He doesn't really say it, but, you know, says his fire's burned out, doesn't know what he's going to do, and there's a little lump in my throat just building up, and I'm like, oh, don't do it, don't do it. Well, I popped the question. I said, I'll buy it. And he equated the volume of business we had in Madison as, you know, you wouldn't want to come here, you've got it made. And I told him about, you know, I don't have the time with my family that I want. I said I would leave Madison for this, and I'm patting my finger on his desk.
Wow.
And when we formed our company in Madison, I had 3 partners. The first thing we did after forming the company was write a buy-sell agreement.
What is that? What is that?
It's in marriage, you have prenups. In business, you really need to know how you're going to
Exit plan?
get out of it. Yeah, pretty much. So once my wife and 2 children were on board with moving to Wayne County, I whipped that out on my partners and say, I'm going home. I'm going where I grew up. I get to do in my hometown community what you guys get to do in your hometown community.
Mm-hmm.
So it took about a year to divest.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a lot of things that go on in selling and then buying another place.
Did they buy you out, or did you sell to the
They
commercial
did.
company?
No, they're still in business to this day,
Mm-hmm.
still growing. So Labor Day weekend of 2005,
Mm-hmm.
I come up here to babysit the funeral home for Phil and Martha McQuiston.
Mm-hmm.
They always left town that weekend. That was the anniversary of their youngest son's death. Nothing's going on, just kick back, go have dinner in town. We get a death call from a nursing home in Indianapolis for a lady named Ethel. The same Ethel who
Right.
was the sister of Bob Knox. Well, Ethel married a guy named Rentschler from Centerville, and she raised her family up here. She was my first funeral in
Man,
Fountain City.
this gives me cold
You know,
chills.
I mean,
This gives me cold chills,
you
man.
can't see strings, but sometimes in life
Yeah.
you just feel like, oh, I guess
So
I'm
you're
supposed
just
to
up
do
here
this.
visiting. You haven't even bought the
No,
company yet.
we're in the process. We're about 60 days away from closing. And Ethel's family from Madison came up for her funeral. Those people knew I was leaving. They didn't really know where I was going. And it was almost like, bringing your girlfriend home to meet the parents. Oh, this is where you're going to be. And I see those people still maybe once a year.
It's incredible.
I don't know. I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I've got a couple things to unpack, Keith. One, let's take a stroll back. You were saying that you were kind of listening to the conversations with the commercial companies that had opportunity they were buying up everything. One, how did you beat them out? And then two, you really didn't talk about an inkling of moving back, except for the signs you were getting. So kind of, can you touch on those two little pieces?
As far as the beating the company, I just had confidence. I didn't bash them, and it was almost funny because we would repeatedly get run down in the community by the locals that had sold, and it was almost like free advertising. Keep saying my name. I don't care.
Reputation, yeah.
That company spent $7.5 million to buy 2 funeral homes, 3 funeral homes, and a cemetery. I borrowed 10% of that to build a funeral home from the ground up. And faith, kind of like moving back. My biggest fear at that time was I had no fear.
Wow.
And it just worked out. I look back at pictures of the groundbreaking, and I'm holding my less than 2-year-old son. And it was a big risk.
Did you have attitude like you got to make this work? There's no
do.
no chance it's not going to work. And did that kind of help you set your fear aside? Because
We weren't completely positive. There was fear, but it worked out
yeah,
for the better. It happened. And honestly, that experience and that success put me in the position to come back and buy the place in Fountain City. So
wow. And so ultimately, you gave up or to make the decision to leave a very successful business, knowing that the business was going to be less, but you have better work-life balance to be in your family's life.
Sure.
That's amazing that you were able to do that. What did anyone inspire you to start thinking like that, or you just came up with this on your own? Like this is where I need to be. This is what I want out of life. I mean, was there anything in particular that motivated you to arrive at this decision in your life?
at that point, the desire to slow back down a little bit. I wanted that family time. One thing we see a lot in our business is, we see families. And I tell people today, I serve a lot of families, but I don't so much serve a lot of families anymore, if that makes any sense.
Break it down for me.
We're not as close as we used to be. We're,
Because of times change, technology.
times change, we move away, we just can't come home, we can't make it, I'll FaceTime you.
Yeah.
I got to coach baseball here. I got to coach track and cross country with my daughter. I got to have dinner most every evening at our table with a family, which is important.
Oh, extremely everything.
It's everything.
Yeah.
It's the foundation of the rest of your life. But I was blessed in that regard too.
Now you've been back here for how long now and in business?
We're in our 20th year.
Incredible.
Fountain City.
Incredible. How are things going now?
I'm pleased. I mean, I hate to say, people go, "Are you busy?" Busy enough. I don't want everybody to drop dead.
You're not looking to grow in other communities. You're content with where you're at right now.
At this point in my life, no. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think expansion would be good for my health.
So you've been back for a long time now, and you had gone and left a couple different times, and you realize you need to be back where you grew up at. And so, I mean, how do you feel? What about the state of our community right now? I mean, how do you feel going and having the experience you've had and coming back? I mean, how do you feel about things now?
Well, everybody knows about Madison. It's amazing. Oh, I go there all the time. I lived there for 15 years. Madison has always had it going on. They've got a festival every month. They've got their drama.
Yeah.
Moving back here 20 years ago, I thought this place is really ripe for a rebound. Call me a pessimist. A rebound is happening.
Yeah.
But it's not happening as fast as I wanted it to. In the last couple of years, I feel momentum.
Yeah.
I like Main Street, that I can look all the way down the street and see the other end of it. I look forward to cruising this summer.
Yeah.
Things are happening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do wish that all of the forces involved would kind of shift their energy
A little faster.
to move in the same direction.
Yeah.
It just seems like there's always something that kind
Yeah.
of just slows things down, and it's frustrating.
What would you change about our community? What's one thing you would change if you could?
I wish people had more pride in their town, their everything, what's right in front of them.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah.
I can't. If I could bottle it up and sell it, I wouldn't be on call 24 hours a day, going to hospitals and nursing homes anymore. I don't know what changes that. That's been a cultural shift over time, and it's just reversing that just seems like an impossibility. I hope it's not, but it's kind of concerning.
Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Webster, you got an amazing story and definitely an inspirational one. Still got Coach Hill sitting here talking to you about these things haven't fallen in place for you. So you've had the right people kind of impact your lives, some even indirectly. So, talk about maybe a time where you had a success story, how you might have impacted someone's life and changed their path in life. What was that like?
I don't know that I can quantify any of them. I kind of had a moment a couple of years ago. We had a tough case. We had a student die in our school community, and I handled that service. And I look back when I was one of those kids sitting in the crowd, and I said, I want to be like that funeral director. I really didn't know what I was talking about. Everything that goes into what that is. And I'm on one end of this young man's casket, wheeling him out of the church. I can feel 300 eyes looking at me, and I think, wow, I am just like the guy I wanted to be like.
Wow.
And I hope somebody in that crowd, more than one somebody, is inspired by what they see. I hope there's somebody out there that wants to be like that guy
Yeah.
someday, because I'm looking for him
Yeah.
or her.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. I think I can imagine what you're going to say, but on a personal level, me, like, one of the things I struggle with, and I'm getting better. There's a book I'm reading that's really helping me right now, and I'll get it here in a second. I think it's I'll get it here for a second, but death, I really have a hard time dealing with that. And my family was like, when I was younger, like, I'm talking 10, 11, we weren't allowed to go to funerals. But as I got, teenager, etc., we would come. And I was fortunate. I didn't really experience a lot of death in my younger years. And it's like I didn't know what that feeling was like until I got older, losing parents, grandparents, cousins, things like that. Like, it really kind of bothered me. And so, I mean, how do you get? I think I know what you're probably gonna say, but how do you get so comfortable doing? I know it's probably second nature now after all these years, but man, like the first time you dealt with, a family and their loved one and getting them ready for service and things like that. Can you kind of talk about that? And how'd you get? Were you ever scared or fearful of death, like kind of like I'm dealing with?
I wouldn't say I'm scared of death. I also wouldn't say I'm comfortable with it even today. Every case is different. Most cases now remind me of something from the past, which kind of helps me work with a family. Death is a part of life, and I know that's cliche, and it's a hard part of life.
Yes, sir.
But it's going to happen to all of us. And I mean, any funeral director should be there to help whoever calls upon them to take care of what they need to do, what they want to do. We're to the point in our culture, sometimes families just really avoid it altogether, to the point where I don't even want an obituary. Okay. When I have a strong enough relationship with a family, and I seem to be saying this more and more, if you don't at least let the public know, you're going to have a visitation 200 times in 200 different places over the next year. You're going to have it at the gas pump while the icy wind's blowing in your face. You're going to have it in aisle 5 at the grocery store over here. Then again in aisle 10 with somebody else. Hey, how's your dad doing?
Yeah.
Oh, they passed away.
That's
Oh,
a great
he was
point.
my baseball coach. Oh, he was my favorite teacher. It's something that we should share with everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, this happened to my family. I need your support. Let's validate that a life was lived. It's hard, but I think in the long run, it's also easier. And it helps that immediate family feel better. But what do I know? I'm just a casket salesman from, East Central Indiana.
So you talk about, you got, not every talk about this. So I mean, I think it's important. There's people that don't have their stuff together, financially, to their next arrangements for a situation like this, and then their family, their loved ones have to deal with it. Can you talk about any best practices to get that you should take place action now to get loved ones ready, or maybe insurance available, and then in the event that you're not prepared, what does that process look like to maybe be able to get someone buried? Does that make sense?
Sure. Everything needs a plan, including our death and our disposition. It's better to sit down ahead of time, talk about what do I want, compare it to what do I need with what I can afford. Dying doesn't have to be expensive. Making that plan, talking about it with your children or your siblings or whoever is going to be in charge of taking care of you. Avoiding it is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
I've never sat down with a family where a prearrangement had been made and they, gee, I sure wish we could start from scratch right now because my head's so clear. I could whip off all this information at a time when I'm so emotionally wrecked. It's a lot easier to do that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Just
I don't know what it is, and I get it's uncomfortable. We don't want to have those conversations now. And then it's a mess later.
well, I don't know if that's a faith thing. I don't
Possibly.
know. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that I've worked with that think when death occurs, the lights just go out. I'm not one of those people. Some of the things that I experience and feel, I don't imagine those things. This is a life, but I don't think it's the life in its entirety. I just don't believe in that. And even if the lights do go out, the lights are still on for the people left behind, and you still got to deal with it and take care of some things with that individual that you just lost.
Man, what's one piece of advice that you would give that person out there that's looking to be like you? Some information that you may have learned years ago. What would be one piece of advice you would share with that person out there listening?
Reach out to somebody like me. It doesn't have to be me. Walk into a funeral home today and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Talk to your guidance counselor at school if you're that young. If you're looking for a second career, I know a very good second career funeral director right here in Richmond who is outstanding. Get in front of people that are doing it. Find out what it takes to get to that starting point, and just start checking those boxes and start doing what that person hopefully advises you to do. And that's in anything.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel.
Nope.
Find someone that's being successful at it and pick their brain.
And don't be afraid to reach out for that help. And, you're where I want to be.
Yep.
What do I have to do to get there?
Man, I'm not afraid to do that. Is there anyone out there on your staff or family, friends, past, present, whatever, that you would like to give a shout out to today that's maybe inspired you or helped you get to where you are before we wrap up?
We don't have enough time. There are the people that were ahead of me. I'd give a shout out to Ernie Mills. Ernie and I enjoyed some good conversations together. Sometimes we would vent. Sometimes I would talk him off a ledge. Phil McQuiston, same way. Boy, you wouldn't believe this or that. Okay, here's how you deal with it. My teachers that I had, my parents who are both gone. I was blessed with a single breadwinner, stay-at-home family. I had all the foundational pieces to succeed, and that doesn't mean if you're missing a piece, you're not destined to fail. But and I would think also the families that have put their trust in me. When I was gone 15 years, that's a long time. Nobody ever had to call me.
Yeah.
But, and I'm the first generation owner of a funeral home that was in a family for 4 generations.
Incredible.
So, I don't know. I feel blessed every day, and yeah, I could think a laundry list of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm blessed to have you here today, and it's been a pleasure spending this time with you and get to know you a lot better. I'm glad we had time to do this with your busy schedule, so it's appreciative you being here. Man, I look forward to continue to cross paths with you in the community. Don't be a stranger to reach out. I'd like to continue growing our relationship. And, man, I wish you nothing but the best, and we'll touch base in the future. That wraps up another episode of Diamond Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great week, everyone.